True manhood is shown not in the choice of a celibate life. On the contrary, the prize in the contest of men is won by him who has trained himself by the discharge of the duties of husband and father, and by the supervision of a household, regardless of pleasure and pain. By him, I say, who in the midst of his solicitude for his family shows himself inseparable from the love of God, and rises superior to every temptation which assails him through children and wife and servants and possessions. On the other hand, he who has no family is in the most respects untried. St. Clement of Alexandria, Miscellanies, Book 7. One of the monks just passed by, so that'll make for an interesting conversation. It sounds a lot worse than against that, but that particular essay was against the Gnostics. Basic truths cannot change. No matter how much the world tries to reformulate them, what is immutable truth here now, today, will be so for all time, throughout all ages, and for all men, and for all nations. There are 3 immutable truths that I wish to present to you for your consideration in this conference on being a poor knight of Christ and being married at the same time, or for those of you who are considering becoming married. Words have consequences. You cannot have it all. Your wife is the most important living person on this earth in your life. Value has no meaning except in relationship to other human beings. What you and I find valuable is personal and different for each and every different living person. That is, of course, outside of those who have completely conformed themselves to Christ, who find all the treasure. Family values, community values, market values are a fiction, a clever network of guesses for what we think the average person might be willing to trade for this or that, or not give up on. We see the strength of these values when they're so easily shaken about by the world. The stock market is up one day, it's down one day. Gold is valuable for a decade, it's not valuable for a decade. Family values of just 15 years ago are not the family values of today. How you and I value something can be broken down into 2 parts. What something can be used for, and what does it cost to us? The vapidity that exists throughout society today tries to pretend that this does not exist, that the best things in life are free, as a popular modern cliche goes. It is true that the best things in life cannot be purchased with filthy money. However, the best things in life are normally paid for with toil, with long suffering, with tears, blood, and the utmost perseverance. The most precious thing that we can give in life is our life itself. And of course, to wager our souls. To some degree, this is a great summary of the 2 most precious things that you in this community cannot buy with money. A true sacramental marriage, blessed in the eyes of God, and a true vocation as a brother in this militia template. What does God and his church demand as the price for marriage? He demands a contract binding unto the point of death for a man. That the man must be willing to suffer and lay down his life for his wife, as Christ did for the church. Only when a man agrees to do this, that is, offer up his life, and that is in more ways than one, that is also in the daily toil of labor, does the church say, okay, we'll allow you to marry. And what does a man have to offer for collateral before God and the church? His soul. We are pledging the very salvation of our souls on the execution of the duties that a husband has towards his wife and towards his children when we enter into the contract for marriage. To protect them, to labor for them, and of course, we also have to, no matter how wily, aged, and difficult they may be, even choose to continue to love our wives. They had to explicitly mention that, of course, in the New Testament. Just like how they had to explicitly tell women to obey their husbands. So I ask you, what does this association demand of you, if you wish to wear the white robes? We demand that you enter into a contract with us, that you are willing to suffer and lay down your life for the church, to humble yourself in obedience, that you practice detachment and chastity. What is the collateral for this contract? Once again, it's your soul. No one today is going to hunt you down for committing adultery on your wife. You're not going to be stoned to death in the United States. No one in the Militia Temple, we're not going to cast you into monastic prison if you don't observe the laws of our order, the rule. Or put you on a diet of bread and water. Or throw you into the Cistercians and remove you from the order, like in the ancient world. That's not going to happen. All today is you have to post your soul. I hope none of us is deceiving ourselves into thinking that we can swear to live out this life on the gospel itself. They don't even ask us to do that in the marriage ceremony. Put both of our hands on the gospel during our vows, and hope that we can not live out the rule and the statutes and hope to be saved. How do we enter into those contracts? A period of preparation, right intent, and by saying a few words. Words have consequences. Those words led to certain blessings. Those words led to certain duties. I mention this because I wish to bestow on you, for those considering marriage and those who are married, a warning specifically to those who may want to be married. That choosing to pursue this vocation will have consequences for your marriage. If you observe the fullness of our life, there's a certain blessing that will go to your marriage. If you do not choose to observe our life, if you try to observe it in the manner of a normal layperson, then it will actually harm your marriage. These two things become interconnected. There's a reason why we make knights, even married knights, take the vow of chastity. Because now your marriage is our business too. Because if you break fidelity to your wife or your marriage vows, you've broken association with us. You've interrupted the flow of grace into your vocation and into your life. It is part of the human condition. But oftentimes, and I assume your wives and girlfriends love you, a very eager man will go to his girlfriend or his wife wanting to join, and because they love him, and they don't consider the change that's going to happen in their life, agree to write a letter blessing the vocation, allowing for entrance into this brotherhood. But they're not really aware of the various burdens it's going to impose on family life. For example, many of you traveled here. You left your wives. You will have to pay a tithe. That comes out of something in the family budget. It's very important if you are considering marriage and that you wish for this to be something that your future wife accepts. You very clearly let her understand what she's getting herself into. Which leads me to the second point. You cannot have it all. It may not be possible for you to be a knight and a Little League coach. You have to be a knight first. You cannot have it all. There's nothing wrong with being a Little League coach. However, an activity pursued for pleasure must be only secondary to your duties to this brotherhood. We must put the practice of our asceticism and our duties to one another in front of any pleasurable activity with our families. Not our duties towards our families, like making a living for them, protecting them, being involved in the moral life of your children, but pleasures with the family. It may not be possible for you to pay the tithe, take a long vacation every year. You cannot have it all. It may not be possible for you to every night watch TV with your spouse and say your canonical hours. You cannot have it all. It may not be possible to visit your family every weekend and still, and I mean your extended family, I'm not saying move out from your household, and still meaningfully participate in a communal life of a night. You cannot have it all. It may not even be possible for you to do the extra devotional activities that you like going to a weekly novena for Our Lady of Perpetual Help at your parish. You cannot have it all. If you choose to live out the life of a knight, other things will be displaced unless you have a very open life. I mean, if you're the person in the gospel who is standing around at the last hour just waiting for somebody to tell him what to do with his life, perhaps like this will just slide right in for you, a full life. If you try to have it all, you'll just be a lousy knight, a lousy Little League coach, a lousy employee, a lousy husband. No. Be a great knight, be a great husband. I mean great relatively speaking in that you fulfill your duties every day. You have given up your life to your family, through your sacrament of marriage, and to the church, both. It is enough for a person. That's enough to stretch somebody out on the cross and feel some real tension. Do not add more onto your plate without first discussing it with your spiritual director. Do not add more extracurricular activities to your life than you had before embracing this vocation. After embracing it, it is a time of pruning from now until death. This day, this wonderful day, we get to live a day in this world as it ought to be meant. It was so funny that the canons did a boys camp this week, and they did something for the parents. It was like a play on Friday that I went to. And one of the canons at the end got up and said, we thought it's very important for the children to come and see that, that you can have fun and love God too, We see that the canons are playing and praying and doing both, right? That there's something realistic, that we're not just in here every single day, right? And that you can do both. You can love God and serve God, and it's not just like poor Father Alvin's chained to the pew up there, right? But at the same time, our life in heaven is basically this, a life of godliness. And we would all be much happier if this is what we could make our life about. The fact that we have to labor and toil was the punishment for Adam's sin. And it's going to be an interesting thing when we, perhaps some of us will obtain the ability one day to retire. If in that retirement we live out the fullness of the rule and the vocation that we were called to then, that would be the hour of testimony for some people. Of the people living on earth, your wife is the most important person for your vocation. Because your wife is the most important person for your salvation. No matter how many people may try to deceive themselves about the lack of proximity of their wife, or maybe their marriage not having worked out, the duties that are bestowed upon you through that sacramental marriage uniquely binds up your salvation with that person until death. And these duties paid to our wives are not to be done for her sake at all. They're done to show our love for God. We love our wives for the sake of God. That is why, no matter how good or bad your wife is, being faithful to your wife for the sake of God in your life will make your life better because of it. Marriages don't make you happy. Doing your duty in marriage will make you happy. That means that going through good times and bad times, your salvation, by sticking it out together and not knowing that they'll stick by you, but you knowing that no matter what, you will stick by your end of the contract, will help you get through all hard times. God is giving you that grace, and you can count on it. Just like when we took our vows, God gave us the grace to live out the rule fully. That was the deal. That was the gift. We pledge. He gave us the grace to pledge. He then gave us the grace to live it out. And we don't know until we get to that moment beyond the vows, in a sense, if we're going to be faithful, just like the martyr doesn't know if he will see it through to the end. Your wife, though, they have to pledge us. They have to write multiple letters when they become a novice, and then another letter when we take our vows. She is the ultimate teammate in your vocation. She too made a pledge before God, not with the same degree of solemnity, but she said in her letter that she will help you live out your vocation. And by making this pledge of you and your time and your energies, and she said, go and serve God, you are obtaining for her all the merits of the sacrifices that you make, and she is obtaining merits as well for the sacrifice of having to depart from you or to suffer certain things resulting from your vocation in militia. In a way, you're her best investment, her retirement plan. St. Nicholas von Flue, who was a Swiss mystic, he was a married man, who got permission from his wife after having her 10th child to leave her and become a hermit. His wife has never been formally canonized, Nevertheless, today is still praised in all Switzerland and so forth for her magnanimity in allowing her husband to pursue the hermetical life, of which he was a total mystic. He lived on nothing but the Eucharist. He stopped wars and performed miracles. Oh, and he died in the arms of his wife, too. God saw that. And so you, in a way, are the same thing for your wives. She is giving you to God to do this thing that we do. It's not easy being the wife of the night. We are strange looking at Mass. We are obscure and unknown. We don't make any money by doing this. If anything, we have to spend a lot of money. And the world devoid of faith either looks upon this as some type of eccentric activity of some guys, or regards it as foolishness and looks down upon it. So it takes real faith for a wife to allow us to do it, to do this thing. And so we should also encourage them, as they are bound to encourage us. That because the world places no value in this, all the greater reward in heaven. He who in the midst of his solicitude for his family shows himself inseparable from the love of God and rises superior to every temptation which assails him. We do not live in a monastery. If we do not obey the rule, the prior doesn't come into our room and kick us in the butt. There's no self-accusations at the end of the day, or accusations against other brothers. You don't have to deal with a nasty glare if you come in late to say your office. Our temptation, oftentimes in our married life, is not to go out and commit adultery. It's to allow ourselves to live out our marriages as just a normal guy, a normal Catholic. A rosary with the family in the evening, a little catechism with the kids, and then to bed. That's not what we do. We have to live out the fullness, the canonical hours, and the rosary, and catechism with the kids, and our apostolate, and returning the phone calls of the brothers in need. So that is what we need to be on guard of. And that is where our wives can also help us. To help us if we ever fall slack in observing the fullness of our vocation. The best things in life are paid for with toil, with long patience, with tears, with blood, and with suffering. That is what our marriages deserve. That is what our vocations in the night deserve. That is what the other brothers in this order deserve from you. And that is what our loving God deserves. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.